Hey, welcome back to Ultra Life. Today, talking with a new friend to me, but someone I've heard of for years, Paul Conrady, right here in Oklahoma City, quietly observing individuals that are going on a scuba dive in what's called a hyperbaric air environment. And when that happens, magic happens. We've talked about things such as stem cell activation. We've talked about the history of hyperbaric air. We've talked about the fact that hyperbaric oxygen is a term that's kind of unfriendly because the FDA has built a regulatory environment around that. So consequently, we call it hyperbaric air. You'll hear us say that. We make no claims for anything because Paul has this beautiful opportunity. He uses certain tools. We'll talk about that in a minute, like measuring people's lung capacity. But we had a 3-year crisis happen called a pandemic, and individuals have had real difficulty breathing that have had COVID, many that haven't even had the vaccine but had a big bout with COVID. So with all that said, we were talking last week on our segment with Paul about a friend of his that showed up at church dragging around an oxygen tank with him one day. And so Paul, welcome back again. This is so fascinating for me. I've wanted to talk to you forever. We need to let all of our integrative doctors know. We need to let our compounding pharmacists, our clinical nutritionists, we need to get the word out at integrative. If you're watching this broadcast and you know people around the metro area here or even in other states, people come from all over the country to spend time with Paul Conrady at hyperbaricfitnessok.com. You can find out all about it there, or Paul at hyperbaricfitnessok. Paul, welcome back for this third segment. We're going to have a lot of fun, but you are enlightening me to individuals that have diminished lung capacity. You use a little tool. What did you say that's called?
Peak flow meter.
A peak flow meter.
Asthmatics use it.
They breathe into it, right? And it basically tells you what level their lung capacity is at. Okay, remind us again and catch us back up. This friend of yours, or this guy you go to church with, you saw him with oxygen, you coaxed him to come out. What happened?
Before he got in the chamber, he blew a 200.
And that's very low.
That's very low.
Okay.
So we did a 1-hour session, and when he came out, he blew a 300.
Amazing.
And then I said, hey, so we've just released the pressure of hyperbarics has released stem cells in your body. Okay.
So that is just, it's a given, right?
It's a given. That's what
you take
that's
somebody
what the
on a
studies
dive.
are telling us 300%.
Okay. So have all you anti-aging regenerative people out there, when you go to pubmed.gov, type in H as in Harry, B as in boy, O as in only, T as in Tom, HBOT, and then type in stem cell. See what you find. Thanks for that.
There's a ton of information. So anyway, we do the. I said, now we've released stem cells throughout your body. So tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to blow on the peak flow meter again. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, dude, why are you here? I'm telling you what to do. So that night he sent me a picture of his peak flow meter at 350.
Oh, nice.
So in one day, in 12
well, really in a few hours,
12 hours.
Right? Okay, half a day.
Yeah,
okay.
in 12
Amazing.
hours, he went from 200 to 300,
so
350.
So is there a continuation to this story?
So he ended
because
up,
the goal was,
so
you don't want to be on oxygen a long time.
Yeah,
right?
so 10 days later, the oxygen company came, picked up all of his oxygen.
Amazing.
He's off oxygen.
Amazing.
He lost his job. Okay, because I mean he can't pull an oxygen bottle around him. The job he did.
Wow.
So 2 months later, he got his old job back.
Oh, fantastic! Now I'm curious.
And he was expecting to not ever work again.
Now, with someone like that, what do you want to see with a peak flow meter, and what is possible for someone? Let's say they come in for 3 weeks. Let's say they do 2 dives a week. So they've had 6 treatments, or should I say 6 experiences. How's that?
Yeah.
6 hyperbaric air experiences, sessions.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. What have you seen? Someone that's like down at a 200 on a peak flow meter, what could happen after 6 sessions? Where might they be sometimes?
Well, everybody's different, and
right?
that's hard. You know, a
and
doctor's not going to say, hey, in X number of days, I'm going to get
exactly.
you. So they don't do that. And I don't either.
But observations you've seen. As
but
a generality.
he came in for 37 sessions and got up to 550 plateaued. When he plateaued, we knew he wasn't going to get any more than that.
Okay.
And that's when we called it done.
Okay. Now, out of curiosity, because 37 sessions, that's a lot of sessions. Did he have any other mitigating health challenges that in your observation you saw things changing? Obviously, a person with diminished oxygen capacity, fatigue, probably trouble sleeping.
All the above. I mean, he had lots of issues. And the reason I'm so excited about working with you guys is, what does joint pain relief? I mean, we already provide joint pain relief just doing hyperbaric.
Well, if you're stimulating stem cells, yes, you're having a lot of things happen.
So what if we incorporate? I always use the term 1 and 1 equaling 3.
Yeah,
I want
absolutely.
synergistic healing.
Yeah, and that's a real thing. It is a real
And so
thing.
how fast can we accelerate this whole healing period?
Yep.
So that's why I'm anxious to be involved with your product, telling my clients about it, and
So,
that's where I'm headed.
On a little side note, because you may or may not, I had several sessions of hyperbaric air over in Bethany many, many, many months ago. The reason I went in is
Hyperbaric
because,
oxygen. Let's not get people confused.
Okay, hyperbaric
Hyperbaric
oxygen.
oxygen.
There we go. So I went in because I had actually been exposed to mold and I had an issue with a lung, and it just made sense to me. Was I on the right track? Because I will say
Absolutely.
this, I'm so much better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anytime that you have any kind of toxicity, in fact, so much so that we have to go over with our clients that in 2 to 4 sessions, it's not going to be unusual to have a pretty good Herkimer reflex.
Okay.
Did you experience
Yeah,
that?
and for those of you that may have not heard that term, Herxheimer reaction equals detoxification. It can be loose stools. It can be nervousness. It can be anxiety.
Flu-like
It can
symptoms.
flu-like symptoms, fever, things like that. It can be fatigue, it can be brain fog. And that's what I call a healing crisis, because if you're moving through a detoxification, if you're moving through and having a Herxheimer reaction, your body is trying to shed and get rid of things that have been oppressive to your health. So,
Can I explain that a little bit?
Absolutely.
This is how I relate
Fantastic.
it to my clients. When they're in that situation, we don't want to throw on the brakes.
yeah, but you
But
don't
we
want to
want-
take them over the cliff either, right?
We want to take our foot off the accelerator.
Right.
We want to wait until their health returns to normal.
Yep.
The flu likes it, all the above, and usually in a day.
Right.
It's not like they have to wait 2 weeks, but we want them to be normal again before they get back in, because what you're doing is you're overtaxing the liver.
Right.
We don't want to damage the liver. That's where all these pathogens are being sent to be released. And if you bombard it too heavily, that can be a bad thing.
Yeah, no different than when a oncologist is doing chemotherapy to someone. It creates this die-off, and there can actually be what's called tumor lysing syndrome, because the liver has been overloaded from the die-off. And it, back in the early days, it was kind of like, we're hoping to be able to kill the cancer before we kill the person, because this fine balance that exists there. So, okay, this is awesome. Increased oxygen capacity. Individuals may be suffering from post-COVID aftershock, whether they were vaccinated, whether they weren't. We know that particular strain of virus really creates some problems with people. It really does. So, what gets you up out of bed every day, Paul, when you go down there and do this? And by the way, how many years now, and just off the top of your head, how many people have you taken on a dive?
No idea. You keep
In the
saying
thousands,
You keep
right?
saying you're not really understanding what we do.
Okay, well, let's keep talking about it.
We have a chamber right
Yep.
now at our location that holds 12 people.
Oh my gosh.
We have
that's
16
fantastic.
people in there often.
When you mentioned the hotel story on our last segment, I thought, why don't they build some of these things big enough to house a troop of people?
Yeah,
So they're starting to do that.
Yeah, so we're relocating because of growth. We're moving to
Astonishing.
122nd in May.
Okay.
I've got OSU's old research chamber out of the Jinx Airport, 30 foot long.
Amazing.
It'll hold, on the same criteria we're talking about, it'll hold 20 people, but 30 people can get in there. It's huge. It's 30 feet long. The one we have right now
And so
is
people understand
17
this. So
feet
let's
long.
let's get practical.
Looks like
here.
a submarine.
When I did my hyperbaric stuff, I actually changed into what people might call the what you see the surgeon
Scrubs,
walk in the room,
scrubs.
yeah, you see the nurse walk in the room, they're wearing scrubs. I changed into that, super comfortable. It was interesting because I had two different people that gave me my session. One moved me pretty quick, and I had to pop my ears quite a bit, swallow and kind of pop my ears. The other person, I never even noticed needing to pop my ears, and I said, "What's the difference?" They said, "Well, I do it a little bit different than the other person. Take a little bit longer to get you there." So
when we get in the chamber, we get to depth in 5 minutes. We get to 52 feet in 5 minutes, typically. If you've dove a couple of times, if I got a newbie,
now, are people reclining when there's a group type environment like
No,
that?
it's a
Are they
party.
reclining?
It's a party.
Are they hanging out talking to each other?
It's a party, yeah. I mean, you won't believe all these people that are interested in natural healing.
Yep.
They're all sharing their stories of their journey, and everybody that comes in brings notepads and pens because of what they're going to learn on that session.
That's nice.
So,
That's nice.
I mean, do you know what earthing is?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Are you talking about grounding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know
getting your feet
You know how many
in touch
people in the
with?
chamber have never heard that?
Oh, wow.
You know how many lives that's changed?
Oh,
It's incredible.
yeah. Yeah.
And they come back the next
25,
day.
30 minutes a day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They come back the next
on
day.
terra firma with your bare feet.
I can tell you stories just on earthing. It has nothing to do with hyperbarics that solved issues with people.
Oh, yeah. I
And
believe
if we
that.
didn't have the opportunity to have that group
Yeah.
therapy, if you want to call
That's
it that,
fantastic.
oh, it's insane. I mean, that's
so
what's
cool.
so fun. So you say, what is it about getting up to go do this? It's what am I going to learn today?
Yeah.
When I invited Adam to come dive with us, I was like, that came through Gwen,
Yeah.
and I knew I was going to learn. And now you guys have opened up a Pandora's box of knowledge that I'm trying to share now with my clients, and to come and get in the chamber and share your knowledge.
Yeah. Well, fasten your seatbelt.
You're
'cause,
sharing it with
yeah,
everybody. I mean,
Anytime you're hanging out with Adam Payne, you
Oh.
are going to get this incredible, interesting world of pharma mixed with nutraceutical and
yeah.
the science behind all
Oh,
this
yeah.
stuff. And it's
it's an eye-opener.
thrilling
No
stuff.
doubt.
So we've got about 3 minutes left in this segment, 2.5, 3 minutes left. So near and dear to most of our hearts. My dad was in World War II. My mom was the very first Women's Air Force Squadron Commander in Tokyo, Japan.
That's awesome.
And my mom used to say to me when I was younger, and then when I was older, taking care of her before she passed away, when I would be leaving her house, she'd say, "You make sure you learn something new today, son. Every day you need to learn something new." And then when I'd see her in the evening, fixing her dinner, doing things for her, she'd say, "Okay," and she meant it. She'd look me in the eye and say, "Now tell me what you learned today." And she'd wait for me to tell her what I'd learned today. And it's a beautiful practice to have, but you're helping individuals out that have served in the armed forces. Now, you and I had, and I want to get into this, this is so important. A lot of people that know a little bit about hyperbaric oxygen sessions, they're thinking, well, yeah, I've heard that it's the opposite of the country song. The individual that served in the Middle East, and they had an IED blow up near them, and they had a traumatic brain injury, and so they, if it's a man or a woman, they lost their spouse, they lost their dog, they started getting angry at their family, they couldn't relate to their kids, they lose their job, they become unproductive, they get depressed. What you guys do is you reverse the country song, right?
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about veterans and their interaction, how you guys have reached out to the veteran community, and some of the things you see from individuals, because I want to make a distinction. You attended, and this is going to be a cliffhanger here, you attended a conference where you were speaking with ladies that had been in the armed forces. And you asked them how many knew about hyperbaric oxygen, and nobody knew anything about it.
There was 100
But
people
then
there.
you asked a very pivotal question about PTSD/trauma. We're going to get to that in a minute. Tell us about what you see with people that have had a bomb explode near them. What is going on with them when they come see you, and why does hyperbaric oxygen help?
Well, just training with today's modern ordinances. If you see all the videos of the atom bomb, you see this concussion, and then you see a vacuum.
Right.
Right.
The
vacuum is like decompression sickness, creates bubbles in your blood.
Oh, wow.
Just the vacuum. So you have this concussion, which injures your brain, and then you have this vacuum. So imagine
That's
that you're
insult to injury, isn't it?
imagine that you're around that forever. You know what's really that I never knew about until the last 6 months, and I've been doing this for 12 years. I had two guys come in. One's a Navy and one's a Coast Guard. I never thought about it. Both of them were on 100-foot boats. One of them was special ops. Wasn't a SEAL, he was special ops, swift boat.
Okay.
You know what those guys go through on those boats?
Okay, this is a great time for us to pause. We're coming back to another segment. You're going to have to get back for this one. I'm Josh Bellew. This is Ultra Life Today. We're talking to Paul Conrady, hyperbaricfitnessok.com. hyperbaricfitnessok.com. You can reach out to Paul personally by email, paul@hyperbaricfitnessok.com. This is Ultra Life Today. We're going to be right back with the end of this cliffhanger story that Paul's getting revved up about and what he learned.
Our mission is to take nature's most beloved botanicals and enhance them with our liquid protein scaffold technology. This helps it reach your cells faster and better. With exponentially enhanced bioavailability, you'll feel better every day. Ultra Botanica, the feel-good curcumin.
Welcome back to Ultra Life Today, hanging out with Paul Conrady. This is our last segment. Paul Conrady of hyperbaricfitnessok.com. Has your appetite been whetted yet? We're talking about PTSD. We're talking about what Paul has observed, the effects of individuals, and he just told us. So the setup again is he just mentioned in the last segment what happens to an individual when something explodes near them. There's a vacuum created. So you not only have a concussion now, Paul, you've also got air bubbles in the body. And it's a perfect storm for a really bad life, isn't it?
Well, that can be. I mean, obviously that can be, and I don't want to get hung up on the air bubbles.
Right.
But that's what's happening at some level when you're around those ordinances. Yeah. It just makes sense. You feel the vacuum.
Yeah, and you mentioned something too. Just in training exercises, there's the potential for some of this same stuff to happen, isn't there?
Well, I saw a video on YouTube I was going through. We all cruise YouTube, right? Well, he was an instructor for the military, and in training, they were doing door breaches. Well, he's always standing on the inside of these door breaches, which not only create this huge shock wave that he's standing on the other side of the door, but now he's breathing in all the things they just used to blow the door up because it's a non-ventilated area.
Wow.
And I mean, his life was in, and I'm just watching this on YouTube, and he's talking about his life's in the toilet. I mean, he's really, really struggling.
Wow. If you haven't taken a little bit of time recently to pray for veterans and everything they go through, my goodness, I'm learning so much today, Paul. So, again, people are showing up with what was a traumatic brain injury that they may have even been told because they've been in a veterans hospital that, hey, we've done what we can do, right? And then you guys
they leave with a bag of drugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's medications.
Yeah.
Medications to do this, then medications to reverse that, and then to do that.
And to deal with the side effects and on and on and on.
And I mean, it's just an incredible amount of pharmaceuticals.
Okay. So do you what? So
they're not healing. They're treating the symptom.
So you've led me into something. Individuals come to you. Do you witness resolution in the lives of individuals, and how does that change their work life, their home life? How does it work?
The first time they walk out of typically most veterans that are dealing with anxiety issues, which is all of them, I mean, just about all of them.
Okay.
When they come out on their first session, they hold their hands up in front of their shoulders and they just push their hands down slowly. And they go, "This is what just happened to me."
Oh, wow.
It's
just dialing it back, isn't it?
Where does that come from?
That's incredible.
It's hyperbarics. That's what it'll do. I mean, That's how it reduces anxiety.
Now, you mentioned to me in our first conversation on the phone, when I mentioned PTSD, it was almost as if, I mean, it's almost like you had to keep from laughing because you just kind of casually said, low-hanging fruit. We deal with that all the time. What's next? Bring it on. This is just... it's like a magic equation. Hyperbaric oxygen, an individual going into being taken down, what you said, 2.5 atmospheres, right? It's releasing stem cells, and it's causing, is there a residual brain injury that, I mean, can they look at this with some brain mapping devices and say, an individual was this way? Can they prove that? Have they done some of those kind of studies?
Yeah, we have a naturopath that we use up at our other clinic, our oxygen clinic.
Okay.
She has an office up there, and she does what's called Clear Minds.
Feel free to mention her name if you like.
That's Dr. Twyla Wilson. She
Okay,
does
Twyla,
Clear
yeah.
Minds, and so she does brain mapping,
Right.
and so she can create that map, and then she sends all this data to a college, an Eastern college, and they do a prescription. So they can analyze it in depth and then send her back a prescription where she can use the same cap that has the electrodes in it. A lot of people have seen those, but it's got electrodes all over a cap that kind of just fits over your head real tight. And it's actually attached to your scalp with electrode gel.
Wow.
Okay, so now she can actually do a therapy, and that's kind of a high level. I mean, the things she's doing with that are the same things to some extent that happen in the chamber.
Interesting.
Okay. The only difference is in the chamber, you're addressing your entire skeletal.
Wow. Yeah,
Whereas
no
in
kidding.
her situation, you're addressing your head.
Okay, so before we move on to the very important subject of diabetic foot ulcers, you were at this conference, I think you were sharing with a room on hyperbaric oxygen. A group of ladies, veterans, had never heard of hyperbaric oxygen, but you mentioned PTSD, and then you looked at me and you said, now where do you think that women end up with PTSD the most as it relates to the military? My heart sunk when you said that, Paul, because I had a feeling it was going to have to do with some kind of predatorial situation where they were traumatized through some form of sexual assault. And you confirmed that, right?
Well, I heard that a great deal.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of leave it at that. It's not uncommon.
And so what I want our viewers to realize, and so many of our integrative doctors are now learning about this, they're learning that trauma equals deteriorating health.
Exactly.
And you mentioned some things to me related to trauma, and then you mentioned a number of 52 years. Talk about that for me.
So one of the women up there is a counselor, and we got to talk at depth about all these issues, and she was a victim, and she was a victim at childhood. And she said, you know, Paul, what people don't understand is that when these things have happened at childhood, they have found that at an average of 52 years is when this presents.
So isn't that fascinating? It's almost like as the body is aging, that trauma somehow just begins to emerge and create all kinds of problems, depressions, things like that, suicidal ideations, and a difficulty to engage in life, right?
It's just heartbreaking. I mean, that all this is going on and that nobody knows. I mean, there's a lot of drugs you can take, but those drugs just suppress it.
You're
They just
pushing it back,
and,
right?
and you've got to get it out. And so there's some people that we're working with. There's a lot of studies. In fact, Oklahoma tried to pass a bill this last year to study veterans with PTSD using psilocybin as a method of getting them back.
Yep.
And so I don't know where that ended up. I've not heard anything from anybody where that ended up. But I know there's a lot of interest in the psychology community, in the therapy community, of using that type of fix.
Yeah,
you know.
well, it's a therapeutic plant. Use of plants,
exactly.
basically.
I heard several people say that in one session that's 4 hours long, they accomplished 5 years of therapy.
Yeah.
Now, is
And
that...
I know plenty of people that have been in therapy for longer than 5 years, and they still haven't got resolution for what's going on.
Yeah.
I want to mention this. It's so important. This is Paul Conrady of hyperbaricfitnessok.com. It's super important that you hear what we just talked about in the last 2 or 3 minutes. Are you dealing with some level of emotional trauma that may have happened? Physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Guess what? Hyperbaric oxygen may be something that can facilitate some level of progression out of that. We're making no promises. We're not doctors here, but it's fascinating. And I bet they could probably go on PubMed and type in HBOT and then also trauma and things like that, and probably come up with a lot of stuff. So people come in with emotional issues, and do you know some of those today, years later, and how are their lives?
So I'll just a real quick one that was so touching to me, and she wants to become involved with being a wife of a veteran. I'm trying to entice her to be leader of a group of women.
Now, is that an organization?
Not yet.
You mentioned, okay.
Well, I mean, they're
Okay.
probably out there. I haven't found one. She doesn't know of one.
Okay.
But this is what happened. She walks in the front door on a Saturday. Her husband had dove probably 30 times at this point. And she walks in and she's just standing inside looking in at the chamber and the room and the other clients that are in there. And I looked over and I said, "So you're Mrs. T?" She goes, "You're the Mrs." And she goes, "Yeah." And her husband's standing next to her. And I said, "So what's going on?" And she said, "I just had to see this place." You know, she goes, "I'm just in awe."
The miracle chamber.
And
yeah.
I said, "So do you notice something different with your husband? Is that why you say that?" And she just started crying.
Oh, wow.
Those are the stories that I got so many of.
Man.
And that's why I get up every morning. It's fun to go in and change people's lives.
No kidding. Well, see, we're kindred spirits, I'll tell you. Our core thing here, first time I interviewed Adam Payne about this amazing technology that they now have patents on and has been used with doctors all over the world, hundreds of thousands of people now. I said, what's your vision? What's your mission for this company? And he said, "I want to help as many people engage with this product as possible because it creates transformative experiences for their health." And I'm like, that is one of the best mission statements ever, short and sweet, helping people, getting the word out. We need to get the word out for you again. hyperbaricfitnessok.com. Paul at hyperbaricfitnessok.com. You've mentioned some ancillary things to us. You and I and Adam were talking before the podcast today. You mentioned things about diabetic foot ulcers. Tell me about that, because we have veterans and other individuals that have advanced diabetic situations. And as I know, individuals have, necrotic matter. They have flesh that's beginning to rot away. They end up being scheduled for an amputation. Tell me a little bit about your experience with hyperbaric oxygen sessions and that.
Well, it's even air. So people come to me and they go, "Well, no, I got to have oxygen." And I'm like, "No, you don't." I mean, I would have thought that too, had I not gone off and started experimenting, if you want to call it that. I mean,
sure,
I go scuba diving. But all I'm doing is paying attention to what happens when you go scuba diving to 52 feet. And so we've had 3 people that had orders to have toes amputated. Okay? They did the chamber. I said, don't. I said, if you want to take care of your control of your health, give me a little time. This didn't happen overnight. Alls we want to do is take pictures and see if you can reverse it.
Right.
And if it starts healing, then why would you have it cut off?
Right.
So there is
and the way these limbs look. So describe the way a limb looks, because when a person begins to get some results, and we talked about this, it's fast. What is the change from what the skin looks like to as it begins to resolve?
Well, so what we're trying to work with if anybody has access to the Indian community, they probably deal with as much or more diabetes and
I'm a
foot
Native
wound.
American myself.
And so as we need to talk, because as I've talked to people about this, they've all had relatives that have had amputations.
Wow.
So I'm getting ready, on our site, you can go look at, there's a report that our industry did using VA numbers, okay? And why I'm so adamant about amputations and stopping it and treating it with hyperbarics is in the diabetic foot ulcers with veterans, 70% of the veterans that have an amputation are dead in 3 years because they've never dealt with the infection. They're clipping the toe that's presenting as being rotted. They're clipping that toe, but they're never pushing back on the infection that goes to the next toe.
Of course it does.
So it's just a matter of one toe at a time, front of the foot, below the ankle, below the knee, and the femur. And that's what happens on all of them because they never stop the infection.
And you begin to see in just a couple of dives, you begin to see what? You see black and blue going into pink.
People need to understand when you have discoloration of a lower limb, that is the road to a bad situation.
Okay.
So when you see the discoloration, you go straight to a hyperbaric chamber and restore that to pink.
Okay. Well, you can tell. This is Ultralife Today, by the way. I'm Josh Bellew, sitting here with Paul Conrady of hyperbaricfitnessok.com. Obviously, we are going to have him back because this guy could share more and more stories. We didn't even really get to talk about hyperbarics for heroes. Can they look that up as well? That's your 501c3, Hyperbarics for Heroes. They can arrange discounts for certain members of the community based on certain criteria. You need to reach out to Paul Conrady at hyperbaricfitnessok.com or email him, Paul at hyperbaricfitnessok.com. Again, this is Ultralife Today. I'm Josh Bellew, Paul Conrady of hyperbaricfitnessok.com. Thanks for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
We'll have you
Appreciate it.
back.